And we're just approaching 100 people. So good evening to everybody. Good morning to some. That's good morning in the Thursday sense, and to others it's good morning in the Friday sense, because I think we're spanning from the west coast of Canada to New Zealand. Welcome to all. My name's James Mountford, and I'm speaking to you from a rather wintry London. I think this is the 30-odd of these sessions. A very warm welcome to old friends. I can see people who know the form chatting in, which is wonderful. Scan up and down the chat. And if you're here for the first time, I'm sure Susie will have said, so I repeat, there are no presenters and riders here. We all muck in. I'm absolutely delighted to have brought across, by some kind of magic, from a different Teams room, Amy Edmondson, who was smiling from a small lozenge on the screen. Amy, I'll introduce you in a moment, but it's a great relief when you're in my seat that you are now in the room. What we do here is we take a different slant on kindness each time. And today we're going to look at the link between psychological safety and kindness. And over the last 2 days, I've talked to people who've written all sorts of publications on kindness and asked them for their views on this. One of them said to me that the last person he had that conversation with thinks that they are the same thing. The other person said that the last person they'd spoken to about this thinks there is no relation between the two. So probably somewhere between those viewpoints lies the path. And we've literally just hit 100 people. Amy, I'm going to just allow you to be introduced partly by means of your latest book. And for that, we're going to go to Susie and Maureen, who can show everyone what it looks like in the US versus the British edition.
Very good.
Well, thank you. And it's a joy, Amy, to see you. I've been meaning to call you and try and get together with you. When I read your book, it really resonated with me in so many ways. And when I read a book, if something strikes me, I make a little note in the beginning, in the opening of the book. And I just wanted to show you all what the inside of my book looks like.
Oh my.
There are so many pages, so many ideas that resonated with me. And I really do think it will be fun for us to get together here in Boston sometime and just collaborate on how we might push this even further. But thank you for all you're doing. Susie, how about you?
Thanks, Maureen. Well, Maureen, I went off to get my copy, which, as you can see, has a green cover and looks quite different, the copy that you can pick up in the UK. And Maureen's now encouraged me, because growing up, I was always told never to write in books, whether they were my own or library books. So I'm now going to break that habit, and I'm going to start writing them in my book. And I'm really enjoying, I'm partway through this and I'm really enjoying it, Amy. So thank you very much. And I shall start scribbling in my cover too.
Fantastic. And Susie, just before you go away, you've just been voted, when you look at Amy's bio, she's top 50 this, top 10 that. Susie, you are top 50 most influential kindness advocates in, is it the UK or in Europe? Just tell us a word about that.
So in the UK, there's a campaign that was just, and the 15 leading lights in the UK, and there's also a similar campaign in Asia that was launched earlier this week. It's basically a campaign shining a light on the importance of leading with kindness. And yeah, really humbled to have been highlighted as that, but very much doing that on behalf of this group. And I'm learning so much of being part of this ongoing group of amazing individuals who are trying to influence change in sectors. What's interesting about the 50 Leading Lights campaign is that it's actually across different sectors. So there were 3 of us who sort of work with the health and care system, but there were people from other industries. And so I really hope that we're going to be able to connect with them and invite them into this conversation so we can hear what they're doing in all of their different in industries and businesses. So thank you, James.
Fabulous. That sounds terrific. And I've got one other thing to do just before we go to Amy, which is Kath from Australia. Kath, you have just hosted something called the Gathering of Kindness in Melbourne, and I'd love you to just say a quick word about that. And you've also got a short poem which was, I think, read to open your gathering, and you're kind enough, I think reading a poem is quite a tough act, especially on a screen, but you're going to just give us this short poem to get us going. Kath.
Thank you, James. Well, yes, we've just, well, we haven't quite finished the Gathering of Kindness. The final online session is this morning in a couple of hours' time, which will include both Nikki Macklin and Gabby Matthews. So that's going to be beautiful. The Gathering of Kindness is bringing people together from all around the world to talk about a kind health system and how we can work together towards that. And we use the arts really as the way that we tell the stories. So with music or theatre or other sorts of storytelling. And we had Chris Turner with us just a couple of weeks ago as well. So that was most exciting time. And yes, this poem was written out of the Gathering of Kindness in person by Samir Hebel, who is a psychiatrist from Perth in Western Australia. And yeah, it's a beautiful poem. And he says, I start my day by asking myself, what kindness actions will I do today? And his poem is, what is kindness? Is it a pretty and exotic concept for tired books in lofty shelves, or is it a virtuous action to be carried out by all ourselves? Is it an art? Is it a skill? Is it a conscious choice? Is there a need for a will? Is kindness science, or can be explained by the mind, or is it spirituality to seek and find? Is it inborn? Can it be taught? Can it be learnt? Can it be bought? Kindness is all of you. Kindness is me. Kindness is intrinsic to our universe for us all to be. Thank you to Samir.
Yeah, well, thank you. And thank you to you, Kath, for reading that out. So that is a lovely way. And Amy, we're now at 119 people. This definitely is a record. And that won't just be due to the dark nights, it'll be down to the draw of you. You are the Novartis Professor of Leadership and Management at Harvard Business School. And I was intrigued to read, I didn't know this, that the chair was established to support the study of human interaction that leads to the creation of successful enterprise to contribute to the betterment of society. I think that's quite cool. I would put it slightly differently. I think of you as the wonderful Amy who taught my wife with Richard Bomer and then generously gave of your time in all sorts of enterprises afterwards. And you come without airs and graces to explore these topics together. And I'm sure there were many, many calls on your time for this lunch hour. So thanks for spending it here. Why don't you take the floor to give us your take on this, the twin cousins of psychological safety and kindness. And when we've heard from you, we might have a little bit of a discussion in groups, but Bob will magically put us into extended breakouts and then we'll come back to wrap up. So Amy, thanks for coming, and over to you.
Thank you, James. What an honor to be here, truly. I love the premise. I love the gathering. We're hugging the globe here with our presence here. And yes, I have to agree with you that it was quite a surprise and delight to discover that was the mission statement of this endowed chair. I'm the second person to have the privilege of occupying this chair, but that came unbeknownst to me, that mission statement was already present. And it is, in fact, exactly what I have tried to focus on all these years, which is the study of interpersonal interactions with the belief that, and data to support the idea that can affect organizational outcomes. Now, here's what I want to do on the topic of psychological safety and its relationship to kindness. I want to make 4 points. And the first one is simply this: what is psychological safety? And I often feel the need to start over, go back to basics, because people have all sorts of definitions out there, some of them not quite right. So I define psychological safety as a belief that your context, your environment is safe for interpersonal risks, like speaking up with an idea, a question, a concern, a mistake, a failure, a dissenting view. All of these are interpersonally risky actions but obviously in many cases mission critical for the quality of care and the quality of work in other settings as well. So psychological safety describes an environment or a climate for candor, if you will. Not that it's easy, but that you believe it's welcome, expected, and so forth, and won't lead to humiliation or other forms of punishment. What it's not, and that's important with our lead into kindness, psychological safety is not being nice. It's not lowering performance standards. It's not job security. It's not freedom from conflict. It's not comfort. In fact, it's quite uncomfortable, I would argue. And so I always want to try to be clear about that. Now, why does it matter? Well, it matters because, especially in healthcare, but in almost any industry, the work we do is complex and uncertain. Nobody has a crystal ball. That means that anyone's voice could make a crucial difference at an unexpected moment. There is, at this point in history, considerable research to show that psychological safety measured with a survey measure and other ways, but with a survey measure that I developed 25 years ago, that metric is a great predictor of team performance, of quality improvement success, of retention, of low burnout, and many, many other things. So it matters. In our uncertain, complex workplaces, we need to have permission for candor or problematic things happen. The evidence, as I said, is extensive. If you count the medical literature, and of course we do, there are well over 1,000 peer-reviewed studies with this variable in it. Okay, so that's point one. Point two, what's kindness? Well, you all are better experts on that than I. But one thing I wanted to just lead in with is that kind, like psychological safety, is also not nice. So, James, if I'm somewhere between the two bookends that you described, I'm closer to the one that's going to say it's synonymous. I'm not there, but I'm closer to there than the other side. So kind is not nice. Nice is the easy way out. Nice is what we do when we don't want to bother engaging. We just play nice and maybe tell our friends or our family members later what we really think. Kindness is the harder route. Candor is kind, not easy, but kind. And it can feel terrible at times to engage in it, to sort of give someone tough feedback, to ask for help when you're in over your head. Kindness is connected, I believe, with respect. Kindness is related to respecting who you are, who someone else is, and who you can become. So there's the kindness to be willing to share with you thoughts I have on how you can do better. And of course, that ought to be reciprocal. Kindness is about supporting becoming, I think. Buckminster Fuller, whom I had the privilege to work for 40 years ago, a great inventor and educator and author and so on, said something that has always stuck with me. He said, I seem to be a verb. I'm not a noun. I'm not a thing. I'm becoming. I'm always in process. And I think we're all verbs, and I think kindness is essential to helping us do the learning and the growing that we need to do. Nice supports someone staying stuck. Kindness supports others' growth. Can you be kind without courage? I don't think so. Now, courage is in many ways the flip side of psychological safety. They are two sides of the same coin in a sense. Psychological safety describes an environment where candor feels acceptable, expected, and yet it still will take some courage to lean in and offer your thoughts. Point three is, does kindness help build psychological safety? And my answer is, I think yes, at the risk of making a circular and possibly even tautological argument. But psychological safety research and practice, in my view, has paid inadequate attention, and this is partly on me, to interpersonal skill. The kind of skill or leading skill, the kind of skill that we need to exercise candor and I think perhaps kindness can be thought of as both a value, an aspiration, a value, and a skill. Like the skill of exercising kindness may be very real indeed. I believe these skills are learnable, but I think they're difficult without attention to, a true spirit of curiosity and humility. So some of the skills I think about in this domain of kindness and supporting psychological safety and candor are the skill to learn to pause just long enough to recognize the onset of a habitual, socially programmed response, often taking the form of niceness, or often even taking the form of briskness, inappropriate briskness, if you will. Skill number 2, learning to cognitively challenge your initial response and ask yourself, will that help? Will that be helpful? And then third, the skill of mustering your courage to choose a more difficult, honest, helpful, kind response instead. So the fourth thing I wanted to say was, or touch upon, is how would kindness support a better workplace? I think kindness helps us cope with discomfort, right? If there is more kindness at work among our colleagues, then we are better positioned to cope with the discomfort of candor, the discomfort of the hard work of quality improvement or performance feedback, or stepping up to take responsibility or take leadership for things. So I don't think discomfort in our modern VUCA world volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous world will go away. But I think that kindness is part of the answer to how we cope with it. And I've often thought of psychological safety as about normalizing discomfort, making that an expectation that we will confront it. And the irony of so many of the misconceptions about psychological safety is that people have taken it to mean we won't have to be uncomfortable, whereas I think it gives us permission to be uncomfortable out loud. So is it nice to point out someone's mistake, for instance? No, of course not. But oddly, it is kind. So in that sense, there's a real opposite quality of these two words that are popularly almost synonymous. I also think, obviously, pointing out someone's error is essential in healthcare for quality and safety. But I don't want to imply that kindness is only about tough love or constructive feedback. There are other forms of kindness, often very small and sometimes larger gestures of genuine support and caring that truly make work, work as it should, be more than tolerable, be almost, be more immediately engaging and meaningful, and so I think I'll stop here. So kindness, we know what psychological safety is, what it isn't. We know there's an intimate relationship between kindness and psychological safety. They matter for quality and safety, and they are not easy to build.
Thanks very much, Amy. You, I'm sure, will not have had chance to see the chat.
No, I have
or
not.
Maybe you are capable of speaking
Not
as lucidly
possible.
and fluently as that, and keeping track
of
a 10 a second chat. There's some extraordinarily rich stuff in the chat, which people can scroll up and down. Do you know, I'm going to suggest that we leap directly to our breakouts, because I think if we get into a discussion now, we might never come out of it because it'll be too rich. So the wonderful thing about the breakouts is you change the ratio and everyone can have voice. So Bob is magically going to stream us randomly, I'm assured, into combinations of 5 or 6 other people. I've just popped into the chat a question. What happens quite rightly is that breakouts decide actually what they want to talk about. And we'll have, I think, about 20 minutes there. There's a great question from Peter in Airedale. How do you build psychological safety? So there's that's a plug to go and watch one of your videos, Amy, or read your book. But we'll come to that perhaps in our discussion afterwards. So talk about what you want in your groups. There's a suggestion that I've just popped into the chat, and we will see you in let's say 21 minutes at 6:45 if you're in the UK, or 45 minutes past the hour if you're somewhere else. What we tend to do now is just to leave the floor open for people to unmute and just give an observation or a question, something that struck you, surprised you, was controversial in the conversations we were in. So somebody please get us going.
James, I'll ask Amy a question. Amy, is this something that can be taught? Do you think that you can change someone's approach by giving them feedback about how they're coming across? And have you found at all that it's improving relationships between team members, but also patients and their providers?
Yes. I mean, I don't have data on the second part of the question. I do think this is something that can be taught. I think doesn't mean every single person on earth can be taught. I'm thinking of one particularly visible American who can't be taught anything, but I think people need to want to learn, but the learning that can happen starts with self-awareness. It starts with, as you just said, getting the opportunity to learn more about the impact you have. And when rational people learn that the impact they're having isn't the impact they intended to have, more often than not, they're motivated and capable to learn some new approaches.
Thanks.
Can I just, while I'm here, say I think something went wrong on the, but it also went very right on the breakouts, because I found myself also in a breakout room of about, I don't know, 35 or more with Bob and others. And then suddenly I noticed that at the top of the screen, it said join group. So I, of course, being a dutiful kid, clicked join group. And then I left that big group and I was suddenly in a wonderful tiny group of 2 where I spent the next 20 minutes. And that was lovely. But I wonder whether other people just in those giant groups failed to see the rectangle and failed to push on it.
Maybe. It's like Teams as Narnia.
Yeah.
We've got 3 hands up, and I'm going to go in sequence, which is Bimby first, then Thomas, and then Kirsty. So Bimby.
Hi, good evening, everyone. So one of the things that we mentioned in our group was obviously it's a dynamic aspect and a two-way, or at least a two-way conversation when you're sort of trying to establish psychological safety. It's essentially a dialogue or a group of people involved in a conversation. So a large part of that is obviously setting the right environment to be psychologically safe. And I sort of mentioned a book that I'd read by Robert Cialdini called Persuasion, where you sort of set the tone more in the advertising world as to how to have an influence on people by setting the right sort of background. And I thought that was probably something to consider in setting the right tone for psychological safety, rather than it being pushed from top down or bottom up, because there's different hierarchies, and in high performing teams there's different perspectives. And also came up with the analogy that in many of these different areas, there's only space for one bull in the field, really. So, it's important to find alternative means to set up the psychological safety environment to allow the appropriate conversations to take place in the group. So that was my observation, which I shared with colleagues, really.
Thanks, Bimby. Amy, do you want to comment on that?
No, I guess here I am. No, I don't want to, but here I am commenting. I just absolutely agree. I think setting aside spaces and structure is your friend, right? We need spaces. Sometimes we need processes or rituals to help us engage
Lovely.
cooperatively.
Thank you. Now, Thomas from Norfolk.
Yes, thank you. I'm a cardiologist and leadership coach. So zooming out from our discussion, I think what comes to my mind is that culture, I think, is one of those big questions. And the problem with culture is that you can't change it with mandate. You have to co-create it collectively. And culture is, in my head, like values plus behavior. And many of us, even if you ask, what are your values? We don't know what are our values. My colleagues often think that this is a cheesy question. So, and because we are in a kind of firefighting mode constantly, we have no time to take a step back and take a deep breath and think and actually create this kind of space and a little bit of buffer space to analyze things and do this work with yourself, like self-assessment. I think that's really, really important. So that was my comment. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Thomas. I can't resist. You've teed up one of my favorite little naughtinesses, which is asking, if I read out 4 words which are values of a well-known organization, can you tell me what the organization is? Okay. Communication, respect, integrity, and excellence.
Yeah,
Communication, respect, integrity, and excellence.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I know the answer.
Yeah, your hand went up, Amy, but you work in a business
I'm not
school,
going to
so
say it. I already know it. Yep. It's
Yeah.
a trap. It's a trap and a trick.
It is. So it was Enron.
It's a true trap trick.
Remember the late lamented Enron, everyone.
Yeah.
Right.
On this topic, it is, Chris Urgis talked about theories in use versus espoused theories. It's really what he really meant was your espoused values are often not consistent with your actual lived behaviors. And there's 2 ways. There's sometimes where it's fraud like Enron, but there's other times where we're actually unaware of the gap. That people believe they're living their values, but they're not. They're not, right? And they need and deserve help.
Yeah. Thanks for taking us there, Thomas. Let us go to Kirsty and then Sally. And then we may be out of time, sadly. But
so actually, what Thomas was saying was similar to what I was thinking as well, which is that when we're all so very busy, it is really hard to create because the psychological safety relies on the relationships and the trust, as others have said. But when we're so busy, it's very difficult, or if there's a lot of turnover of staff, for example, it's very difficult to form those relationships. And a lot of us don't have the physical space either, as well as the sort of, the time, the headspace as well. So I'm not, how do we create those moments really?
So Kirsty, that came up in our big breakout group, and so Amy, we get to pick on you as our sort of speaker issue holder today and ask you lots of difficult questions. So I mean, clearly there are many things that senior leaders, whatever that is, can do to create the right climate. But what can anyone do to create that bit of space in the busiest and trickiest of places? Have you got any thoughts?
Yes, but oddly, it's the same stuff. It's the exact same stuff I think senior leaders can do. It might take slightly different forms in the way it's expressed and manifested, but it really truly is the same stuff. And let me be clear about what that stuff is. Thing 1 is really calling attention to the nature of the work we do in such a way that it just clarifies or makes discussable that it needs our voice, our input, our speaking up, right? It's like we work in a complex error-prone system, for example. Anyone can say that. You don't have to be the chief executive to say that. Say it, clarify how much that means other people are needed, other voices are needed. Number 2, and even easier, just ask people questions, right? Get in the habit of being and showing your curiosity. That is an act of kindness and wisdom, really, to sort of say, hey, James, what are you seeing in this situation? I'd really love your thoughts. And then listen. I mean, that shows respect. That will help me because I'm going to learn something from you. Anyone can do that. And finally, of course, monitor your responses. You know, have the thoughtful response. Learn that breath, that pause, to kind of consider, reassess your initial instinct and be more thoughtful.
You remind me of my grandmother, who said to me when I was a child, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth and used them in those proportions.
More or less right. Yep.
Sally, I think you will be our last questioner or commenter. Sally.
I think, Amy, you've literally answered the question I wanted, which is in our group, we talked about how that niceness and actually teams that are comfortable and get on don't necessarily call it out. And I shared a story about how one of my colleagues watched me do something wrong. And when I said, why didn't you say something? They said, well, I thought you knew what you were doing. And how, you know, I don't think in that situation, me saying at the beginning of my operating list, guys, if you see me do something wrong, just let me know, because we all got on well. It was a really comfortable environment. Right. So you've answered the question, which was, what do I do to promote that without it being, guys, we're going to make mistakes. Make sure you watch me.
I can't help quoting from someone I interviewed for my most recent book, the one that was held up in different colors, Ben Berman, airline safety expert and a captain, who said his opening line to every new crew that he, you know, had the privilege to lead was, I've never flown a perfect flight, right? And it won't happen today either. I need to hear from you, right? So he's kind of got out ahead of it. Like, he knew that they would be prone to thinking, like your colleague said, well, you must know what you're doing. Like, you're the captain, whatever, you're Sally. So he said, I always say it. Without fail, I say it, right? I've never flown a perfect flight. It won't happen today either. I need to hear from you.
Does it sometimes feel disingenuous, though? Like, if you say it all the time?
Actually, no, because it's a whole different, first of all, for him, it's a whole different crew every week. But no, I don't think so. I think repetition is the soul of this sport that we're playing. And I think it has to be true. You have to believe it to be true. I mean, if you do believe you're perfect, it will ring hollow. But I don't see that in you.
Amy, I'll just add a lesson from Bob Waller, who was the former chief exec at Mayo Clinic. And he said, everybody hears things different ways. So whenever he's got an important message, he called it 8 ways, 8 times. And he put a little piece of paper on his desk and would deliver the same message 8 ways, 8 times so that everybody could hear it.
Nice. Amy, I was going to ask you for the final word, but I think that is a perfect final word from you and Maureen. Thank you to everybody, the 101 people who are in the room, and to Amy. You might remember at the start, I'd asked 2 people who were experts on kindness about what they'd heard about kindness and psychological safety, and the 2 different answers. And one of them added a little sentence that I'm just going to close with before I hand to Susie to tell us about December the 21st, our next session, the 3rd Thursday of December. So they said, the reaction underlined for me the dangers of commodification and competition between solutions, instead of the value of multiple languages, creating curiosity, awareness, reflection, and creativity. I think that's really beautiful, and I think that's what we do here. And thank you for the last 59 minutes of it to you all. And the shortest day of the year is our next, or the longest in the Southern Hemisphere, is our next. And Susie, just tell us what's happening then, 6 o'clock, December 21st, and then we'll close.
Thank you very much, James, and thank you, Amy, for an amazing session. It's been a wonderful evening. So just heads up for next month. So on the 21st of December at 6 p.m. UK time, whatever time that is for you. So 21st of December, we're going to be joined by Professor Michael West, and he's going to be discussing compassion and compassionate leadership and the link with kindness. And we've had quite a lot of debate in some of these conversations about what's the difference between kindness and compassion. So I hope you'll join us for that conversation and contribute to that evening. I've put a link into the chat for Michael's recent book, but if you have a look on the King's Fund website, I'll drop some other links in. We've got lots of free materials of things that he's written as well. So please do join us on the 21st of December if you can, just before Christmas. And if you're already broken up for Christmas and you can't join us, then we do record the session, so you'll be able to catch up with it afterwards. And if we don't see you, have a wonderful restful break, and we look forward to seeing you in the new year.
And I hope, since he was wearing a tuxedo today, that Bob will be wearing a Santa hat and reindeer antlers or something next time. So if your day is drawing to a close, have a good evening. Whether your day is beginning, it might be Thursday, it might be Friday. Have a wonderful day, and thank you, everybody, and see you on the 21st of December.
Amy.
Thanks, Amy. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good night.
Thank you.